I want to talk about archival strategies for ideas. Um, what's another way to say that? Strategies, techniques that you have to figure out that will help you remember the principles that you are pulling up from the details in the books and movies and documentaries and other material that we provide for you in this program. So um, now this is a lot harder to do than it may seem initially, right? Especially because we have more devices, more things at our disposal than ever before. At one point, writing in a journal, which is something that you're practicing with here, was much more common than it is now, and there was time set aside each evening for people to write in their journals. Not everybody, but it was much more of an accepted cultural practice and societal practice, and now it just we're all so busy. Or well, see, I really don't like that excuse because you're never really going to find a time when you're not going to feel busy in modern America. Yeah, you might have a few weeks or days or months, but for the most part, especially from your 20s onto your 50s or whatnot, when your working years, you're really growing and being part of life. It gets extremely busy, and if you're not reading now because you don't have time, if I were a betting man, I would bet that you are never going to be a reader or a movie watcher or someone that's involved in text in a lifelong learning sort of conscientious way. We all are involved in texts just because that's how God made us and that's how we are. And many times we get entertainment from these texts. Many times the texts are live, a good sporting event, a good movie, a TV show, a good interview, um, a good concert. Yes, I understand. There's many things in our lives that are there, and they enrich us, but they're not necessarily playing a role in intensive, what's strategic, designed lifelong learning. It just kind of just sort of happens. But when you try to design it, when you try to be intentional about it, then the question is, how are you making time happen to read, to watch, to listen every day, every other day? What's your schedule like? Once a week is too little. Once a day, be prepared to miss a couple of days. How about every weekday? Take the weekends off. Well, you have to figure that out. But the point is, how do you, when you have an idea, when you're reading a book, and you think of a principle, how are you going to capture that? Are you simply going to remember it, or do you have means to write it down, to speak to your phone, to pictures? Do you snap pictures of a part of a book that you want to remember? A lot of these things have advantages and disadvantages. And many times you won't discover those until you try a technique for a while. And sometimes many of these things are counterintuitive. For example, for me, I found that speaking to my phone, leaving voice notes, if you will, as ideas occurred to me when I was driving, when I was just, wherever. Pretty soon I had too many files on my phone that I never took time to title, because just hitting record and getting that quick voice note down and into the device was easy enough. But then if I had to stop and title everything, then the technique gets burdensome, right? And I may as well just write it down on a piece of paper. So I ended up with many, 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 many files on my phone, 30 seconds long, 2 minutes long, 10 seconds long, 4 minutes long, many files. And after, I'm not going to listen to them. I'm not going to sit down every night and hit play. Now, if I realize that I can actually like the phone, I like that, then I might actually, as a part of my time management and my strategy, I might say every weekend I'm going to sit down and listen to these files and delete. And I might tell myself that as I give myself time between when I speak the note and when I listen to reevaluate its importance. Sometimes something, an idea or a thought, a principle that you think you see rising up out of the details seems good in the moment. 3 days later, you look back at it and it's like, well, that's really, that's really obvious, or it's not relevant, or it's actually not true. I mean, there could be a lot of reasons why it drops out, but sometimes it stays firm and it passes the initial time test, which would be 1 or 2 or 3 days. So frankly, I still kind of like that system, but it just didn't work for me. And that's another thing that you're going to have to understand here. One is that, you come up with a lot of techniques. You have to try them to see which ones actually work for you. Second, sometimes things are counterintuitive. For example, I thought speaking into my phone and just having voice notes would be the easiest thing to do. And then it turns out I was left with this whole mess of voice messages or notes that it got too many. And it never worked out. So the third thing is, this is very idiosyncratic in the sense of it's very personalized. It's very, something that works great for one person is not going to work for another person. Okay. And so like I might be sharing a strategy for you, and then you might try it and it's like, well, that doesn't work for me. Okay. All right. That doesn't mean it's not a bad, in principle, a poorly designed technique or whatever. It just, for some reason, your brain, your will, your energy, your discipline, whatever is different from mine. And you might need something else. Maybe you need something more visual. Maybe you need something more audible or oral. Maybe you need something more, I don't know, that speaks to the different ways we remember and learn. Maybe, excuse me. And the fourth thing that I want you to remember about just trying to figure out ways to take notes, if you will, about interesting things that you want to remember through life, or ideas that pop into your head as you're reading books and listening to movies, okay? Is that you change too. For a year, this might work for you, and then you might actually just get bored of it and you need to do something else. That has happened to me many, many times. And now I understand. I'm in a position now where I understand how I learn, how I remember, and I can see things coming, and I can sense when something is not working for me because the technique itself is poor, or something is not working for me because I need a change and boredom is playing into a role of this or whatever. So there are things that work for a season and then they don't, and you have to be sort of committed and intentional, and you pay attention to that and be willing to reinvent yourself, if you will, or reinvent the process. Okay. So, what exactly am I talking about? If I'm watching a movie or, reading a book and an idea pops into my head right now, what am I going to do to remember it? Well, for me, I almost always have a piece of paper and a pencil or nearby. Okay. Like right now, I honestly did not prepare for this, but here it is. And here they are. And I have a lot of these very small sticky notes, and I'll simply write down what I'm thinking, and I'll put it on the cover. You see, you can't read it, but there it is right there. And here's another one. There's the note. Oh, here's another. You're like, yeah, Horn, whatever. You planned this. No, I didn't. They're just right here. And look, there's another one. Let's see. So listen. That's a bit weird. I admit, and that means that I have 5 or 6 places in my house where I read, which also means that I primarily read in my house. Okay. And in these different places, I have a pencil and a pad of paper nearby. And one of the reasons that works for me is I do not like carrying my phone. I'll leave it on the shelf or on the table, or I'll leave it there for hours, and have a horrible habit of texting somebody and then putting it on the shelf walk away and come back 30 minutes later and realize I made them wait. If I did that to you, I apologize. But so, but if I know I'm going to be reading in probably 5 or 6 places, and I really have a nice artistic way of making that pencil and paper thing happen, maybe it's hidden in a box or it's in a nice, beautiful bowl. I love artistic things, Then I write it and I put it, and then every 2 or 3 days, I will collect all of those little sticky notes onto pieces of paper, and I'll just stack the papers, and then once a month I'll go through those notes, and then I'll enter the stuff that really sticks into a journal. I will literally sit there and write it into a journal in a way that I'll remember. Now I got to be careful, because the point is not to fill out the journals. It's not to have this huge amount of information, because see, you can have too much of this and then you kind of burn out and you're like, well, I'm not going to read these journals. What am I writing this for? So you really have to, to start this process of filtration. You're reading something, you think you want to remember it because it's going to help you interact with people better. It taught you something about people. This is just a good thing for the mission you think perhaps God called you to do, or you really want to do, and you write it down somewhere, and you are trying to grow, right? Now that stuff has to come together, and from that you have to abstract out, principles that eventually make it into the final journal, which you'll review once or twice a year or more, whatever, just by flipping through the pages. Now, for me, that is a system that actually works. For you, you might be saying that's way too much paper, and whatever. Okay, all right. So why don't you try the spoken note thing on your phone, and see if that actually starts the process of capturing all those initial ideas, putting them somewhere, and then allowing you to come to that spot and to look through them again quickly to see which ones you want to keep to the second stage, if you will, and you're letting initial ideas that don't really amount to anything fall away, and you're letting the ones that really are gold, to reveal themselves and continue on. How are you going to do this? Are you seriously going to go through this program and read all this material, watch all these movies, and 5 years from now remember like 3 things? Is that really how you're going to do it? If that, I hope not. If that really is your attitude, then we are not. This is not really what Ravenburn's about. Ravenburn is not about giving you content. Ravenburn is about giving you method. You want content, just ask AI. Pick your favorite AI chatbot and you'll get the content. AI is Ravenburn's about giving you method, and this is the method of information control. There is too much information out there, and are you going to be overwhelmed with it, or are you going to ignore it? Are you going to not get involved with it? All of those 3 things are not good for someone on a pilgrim path that involves growth in terms of the mind that you have, the entelechy of the mind, if you will, the purpose of that mind. That is a beautiful thing that you were given, a mind that is linked to your spirit, your soul, emotions, empathy, imagination, memory. It's a beautiful thing. It is yours. And are you simply going to let it sit on top of your shoulders? And you need to be. That's not good stewardship. You need to be stewarding that. So how are you going to do it? As soon as you realize, no, I can't ignore information. I can't get overwhelmed by it. All right. Well, what are you going to do to try to master that information and take away important things from it? All right. And so you need a technique of information control. And what is it going to be? For me, after years of trying many, many things, this whole paper system is working. It's working for me. All right. For you, what do you need to carry a little miniature, literally a little miniature composition journal? You can buy them for 50 cents, or 3 for $1.20 or whatever at drugstore, at Walmart, or whatnot. Do you need to carry one of those in your pocket? Okay, all right. Now the second question is, how are you going to get your writing instrument in there? Is it going to be just, are you going to like physically cut a pencil in half so you have a small golf pencil that you can slip into that journal? Are you going to use a rubber band? Are you really going to put it in your pocket, and are you going to use it? So what's the point of doing all of that if you don't use it? So if that is something you want to explore, you should, because that might actually work for you. You see what I'm saying? Are you going to speak it to your phone and give and put voice notes in there when you're reading or you're watching something, and wham, a great idea hits you, or an understanding all of a sudden reveals itself, a conclusion that you think is important. It's like, I see something here, and you start connecting the dots. See, now that's one thing that we're hoping happens, because although Ravenburn is not about having you embrace the content, you are involved in the content. And as soon as you have this content in you, the next thing we want to see sooner than later is for you to start connecting the dots of that content and seeing narratives form from things that look to be disconnected before, and now they're connected because you are able to connect them because you have enough dots now to do it, and you're beginning to see the patterns. Now that makes for a powerful mind and a powerful platform to interact with and produce change in the world that you live in, your society, your group, and so when you all of a sudden make a connection and you're smack in the middle of something, and you're like, okay, I'll remember and I'll write this down, or are you going to write it down? That's the point. It's like, how are you going to remember this if you just say, well, I'll remember because I have a great mind? No, I'm not saying I don't believe you, but I would bet against you in the long term as far as that being a truly productive and effective strategy. In the long term, we're not in this just to help you get 3 or 4 years of education. We're talking about training you to do 40, 50 years of education. Okay, so in the long term, I don't think that's going to work. So you got to be more disciplined than that, right? And okay, so then what? Index cards? I don't know. That's what you have to figure out. And you have to be willing to fail at this before you find the right thing for you at that moment in your physical space and in your intellectual maturity and your personal habits of that version of you, because you're going to go through different versions down the line. And you need to be somehow making those big, good ideas that you have in the moment eventually make their way into a genuinely archived space. For me, those are journals that are right up in my food cabinets when I open up to make coffee in the morning, and all my coffee supplies are there. Those where all those journals are there, and I pick one out and I leaf through it. I literally do, because I've trained myself to get into that habit, because I know where it could take me. So part of it is just buying into the value of this, and you're not going to do it right away. You have to kind of just trust the system for a couple of years until you get enough dots in you. And then with logic, philosophy, and the stuff you're learning up here in terms of method, you start connecting those dots and making original observations and conclusions that have ownership, a high level of ownership for you, because you actually believe them. And that, I believe, is education. And you got to capture those things. You got to capture them somehow. Maybe they're paintings. Now say, okay, you can see I do art. My whole house is basically an art gallery, but there's another weird one, right down there. I do art, and in the art I will put timelines or dates, or that sounds really dumb, isn't it? Now only very few things go into that I really want to know. Usually it's a much more of a psychological or spiritual truth, but I will quietly encode it into my art that only I know where to look for it. Okay, and when I see the picture, boom, I remember. Now I read a lot of books, but I have committed, and I watch a lot of movies, but I have committed to leaving them visible, but actually spending the money and buying a cheap copy of that book or movie if I think it's important, so that I can see the spines. And if I see the spines, I will be remembered of that book. And it happens on a daily basis. I'll take you on a little tour.